So in our previous section, we saw that while we had created a completely dynamic chart, the issue with the chart was that this only worked with one parameter and one subsidiary. So if we have to kind of move it to a place where it becomes multiple parameters and multiple subsidiaries in one shot, then we go back to our earlier discussion and we use something known as pivot tables. Right, so now pivot tables are powerful tools which would allow us to basically use all this data, and there we don't need the lookup value, we only need the subsidiary value, the parameter value, and the number of years that are there, and select this data on the organize data sheet and click on insert, click on pivot table. Right, it'll ask you whether you want to put the pivot table in a new worksheet or the existing worksheet. If the existing worksheet, what is the location, what is the data? We can check the data. It's B5 onwards till I25, right, which seems fine. We'll put it in a new worksheet. Let's click on OK, and it opens this new worksheet, which on the right hand side gives you pivot table fields, just like we had seen earlier. On the left hand side gives the pivot table. Right, now this is going to be a little bit trickier as the usual pivot tables we've seen, because the data is not organized in the most simple format that is there, right? So we will look at that as we go along. Let's choose the subsidiaries and put it in columns. So we get all the subsidiaries in the columns, correct? Let's choose the parameters and put them in the form of rows. So we get all the parameters in the form of rows. Now let's choose a couple of these years, 2010, 2011 and 2012 in that order given to us. Now you get a sum of all these values here in the form of grand total, sum of all these values here in the form of a grand total, and you see that under cement is where you are getting the years. Ideally, I want the years to be under the parameter. So for cement, net sales or net profit in 3 years is what I want. It's coming here. I probably want it column or row wise in one column, right? It's coming column in multiple columns row wise. I want it in multiple rows column wise. So you spot this sigma values here, which is available on the column side of things, right? So sigma values available on the column side. I'll pull this sigma values from here and put this here under parameters, and we'll note what changes happen. This 2010, 11, 12 that we see here, where does that go? So I select the values and pull it down here, push it here. Now you see cement, market share in segment, marketing expenses, etc. are available, and they are available in a vertical format, which is more relevant for us, right? Now we can go to the row labels and click on this small drop down menu here. There's a filter here. If you see, we can click on this filter and select only the parameters we are interested in. So let's say we are only interested in net sales. So deselect all net sales and operating profits. We only want these two. Click on OK. Now, if you look at these net sales and operating profits, and you see, if you choose these four, the sum of these four is available in column F. That's grand total. That's the sum of all sectors put together. That makes sense. But if you look at this total sum of 2010 here, this set of data, you find that this 1872 is nothing but the sum of 1600 and 272. Now there is no logical relevance of adding sales and operating profit. So ideally, we don't want these totals which are available. They are worthless for us. We don't necessarily need these totals because A, they are incorrectly calculating a parameter. They don't give any relevant information. B, they are just confusing us here. So we don't need this here. What we can do, select anywhere on the table, right click, select pivot table options. Right click, select pivot table options. Under options, you're going to see this. There are multiple tabs: layout and format, totals and filters, display, printing, data, alt text. Totals is what we are worried about. So we click on totals and you see grand total for rows and grand total for columns. So what do you want to show? Do we want to show the grand total for rows Yes, we want to show the grand total for rows because we get to see what is the total sales of the company. Do we want to show grand total for columns? That no, we don't even want that. So we remove that. And now you see the data looks much cleaner and sensible. We can choose this. We can format it in the format that we want, that it gets displayed in the format that is relevant for us, right? Now we can choose one parameter. We can choose multiple parameters. Whatever we want to do, we can put those data points in. We don't necessarily need to have the table additions here. Let's choose only sales for these parameters over multiple years, right? So we have chosen sales for these sectors over multiple years. Now, how do we display this in the form of a chart, right? So just click here anywhere on the table, and on the top menu bar, you see Pivot Table Tools, Analyze and Design. In earlier versions of Excel, you would find something called as options under that tab. You can choose options, or in nearer versions, recent versions of Excel, we will choose analyze. Click on analyze, and on analyze there's something interesting here on the right hand side which is called as pivot chart, right? So there's a pivot chart that is available. We can click on pivot chart and it will ask us for a recommended chart. What kind of chart do we need? Let's say we choose line chart. Let's say we choose a line chart and we click on OK. When we click on OK, you will see now that we get a chart which is multiple subsidiaries sales over these 3 years. And the best part, it allows us to actually choose from the chart itself. You will see there is a filter available here, there is a filter available here. So we can choose the parameter of operating profit instead of sales, and we'll get the chart for operating profits. If we think the charts don't display things correctly, everything else is similar to how charts work. We can move one of these to the secondary axis, right? So we get a sense trend wise, does it look like increasing or not, right? So that could have been done. We could also choose only specific subsidiaries that we are concerned about. So we could go to the subsidiary menu and choose, let's say, only cement and infrastructure to see what is happening there. Do they look similar trend wise, right? And the moment we do that, it starts giving us the data that is relevant. If we want, we can choose more years and put that data in here as well below the chart, and we'll get 4 years. If we want 5, we can get 5 years, and so on and so forth. You can choose, keep adding these data points, and we'll get some of these data points. What's happening to the sales, what's happening to the operating profit. Let's look at the sales data for these two sectors, and we see the sales has been kind of, and because we want this to display correctly, let's put this on primary axis. So we see sales for infrastructure is very clearly declining, whereas cement, which is on the secondary axis, the sales don't seem to be declining as fast as infrastructure, right? Now we have a complete semblance of what data is available. We can choose the data points in terms of what is to be displayed here, multiple subsidiaries, and we can also try and see what happens if we put in multiple data points. Now we could do that, but the issue is that would distort it a little bit. The first half of this would appear like operating profits for both of them. The second half of this would then move to sales for both of this. It doesn't give a very clear picture. So yeah, if you have to look at multiple parameters of multiple subsidiaries, then maybe there are better ways of representing it, or more complicated ways to represent it better. But at least if you have to look at a single parameter for multiple subsidiaries, that data point is available very cleanly and simply on a pivot chart, right? So pivot charts basically solve that problem for us. We can choose to take one of these on the secondary axis. We can get trends in terms of whether sales are going up or sales are going down, and get a sense on how the firm is performing on individual segments, right? We could look at what is happening, for example, to market share in all these categories, and see what's happening to market share on all these guys, all these subsidiaries over this period. And that is where it becomes interesting for us to kind of be able to use what is called as a pivot chart. We can put everything on a primary axis. and format the primary axis numbers as well if we want. So we can go to this format axis, and instead of numbers, we can go right down here on numbers and we can choose format code. We can choose, instead of a general number, we can put it as percentage, and we see percentages coming out on the chart. That solves our problem. Multiple subsidiaries, single parameter. Best way to represent is using a pivot chart. That's where this case gets solved. So that's where there are multiple solutions to the problem that we had seen. If we had only a couple of sectors, we could have simply used if. Because we had more than two sectors, we started creating a single key using VLOOKUP, and that solved the problem, but that gave one subsidiary and one parameter data to us. If we wanted to look at data for all subsidiaries together in terms of parameters plotted in one single chart, that's where pivot tables and pivot charts become extremely useful for us, right? You could try out a lot of other things with these pivot tables and pivot charts as well as you go along, but primarily this solves what we wanted to solve in this particular case. That's the solution on how to use pivot tables and pivot charts on a set of data to be able to project charts on a dynamic format, right? That's it in this particular case. Thank you.